Hi there, this is Ashley from the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm here today to do some basic bead embroidery with you. So the project we're going to be working on is a basic bead embroidery pendant like this one here, using our really fun Golem ceramic cabs that are hand painted. They're beautiful. So if you were looking for something to do with those, this is a great project to do. So once again, you can see there's beading around, and we'll be putting backing on to finish up this basic bead embroidery pendant. With bead embroidery, you're going to need a little more supplies than you normally do for bead weaving. First thing you're going to need is some Lacey stiff stuff. That is your foundation that we're going to be beading onto. You're going to need some Ultrasuede for the backing. You are going to need some wildfire. I'm using 0.006 green. You're going to need some E6000 to attach your cab, and some super new glue to glue your knots. And then for this example here, I used Delicas in matte black. I used my 15-0s were opaque eggplant luster, and my 11-0s that I used around the edge here are cobalt gold luster. Okay, so that's what I used for the example here. Oh, and the cab is the Kaleidescope pearl, and the number is 171012 if you wanted to order that off of our website. Okay, so the one we're going to be making together, I'm going to be using the Dahlia Golem pendant in turquoise. I'm going to be using the matte black Delicas again because I think it makes a really nice frame for the beautiful Golem cab. The 15-0 is matte metallic patina iris, and the 11-0 is matte opaque seafoam luster. So I think those are going to make a really nice combination. And then the backing is also going to be soft morning sky Ultrasuede, which is the same that I used here on the example. You'll also need some scissors to cut your Ultrasuede and your Lacey stiff stuff. You're going to need an awl or a toothpick or something like that to spread your E6000 on the back of your cab. So if you want to gather all those materials and then come on back and we'll start this project together. Okay, welcome back. I hope you have all your supplies ready. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to be cutting our Lacey stiff stuff to a size that we can use. We don't need a really big area outside of the cab because we're just putting literally one row of beads around the edge before we finish it up. So I have it here in the corner, and I'm just going to cut a nice little square there. Just so I have enough room to work, and so that I have enough room to put that row of beads around. So we're just going to start with a little square. So you don't need a whole lot of Lacey stiff stuff for this project. There we go. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to cut those edges off when we're done. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is your E6000. And like I said, I use my awl every time and just wipe it off, but you can use like a toothpick or something like that. Just a little bit on the back there, and I use my little awl to kind of spread it around. You don't need a whole lot, you just need enough to kind of cover most of the back because E6000 is quite strong. I'm going to place it in the middle of my Lacey stiff stuff there, press it down. If there's anything on the edge, I kind of just use my awl to kind of scrape it off there because you don't want that in the way of your beads when you go to sew it on. Okay, so now your cab is ready. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is cut a wingspan of your wildfire, and I'm using a size 10 pony needle. So you're going to put your needle on one end of your thread, and you're going to make a small knot on the other side of your thread, just like you would if you were sewing. Some people think that bead embroidery looks more difficult than bead weaving, or it seems very intimidating because people can create such large pieces. But in some ways, I find bead embroidery easier than bead weaving because you have a foundation to work on. You're sewing your beads onto the stiff stuff instead of trying to like sew the beads together and hold them and make sure that they're in the right place. Those of you that love bead weaving, that's awesome. I love it too. But I think sometimes it's nice to do it in a different way and try some bead embroidery. So that's what we're doing today. All right, so there's my knot on the end and needle on my thread. Okay, so you are going to start by putting a row of Delicas around the edge of your cab. This is how you're going to create the peyote that holds the cab on. So the first thing you're going to do is take your needle and right next to the edge of the cab, there, you're just going to come straight up. And you can start anywhere since this cab is round the whole way, since it's the same the whole way around. If you're using an abnormally shaped cab, I would start kind of like at the bottom where you know your cab's going to be, where the bottom of your cab is going to be, because then you can hide any of those extra knots or whatever. Okay, and for this row, you're always going to be picking up 2 Delicas to start. Because we're doing peyote, we want to make sure that the first row has an even number of Delicas. So I'm going to drop those 2 Delicas down. See how they lay there? And I'm going to I kind of lay my thread to the side because that kind of helps the Delicas lay where they're supposed to be. So then you're going to take your needle and you go straight down on the other side of where those 2 Delicas lay. So you want to leave that space. So I came up next to my cab, then I added my 2 Delicas, and then I went down after them. Now, I'm going to come back up with my needle to the front of my line of Delicas again. So you're going to pull it all the way. And then I'm going to go back through my 2 Delicas on top here. And that'll help secure them in that line and help to start create that the foundation that we need to start the peyote. It'll actually make one of the beads sit up and one of them will sit down. So it'll be easier to do the second row of peyote. Okay, so I'm going to continue picking up 2 Delicas, dropping them down, kind of laying my thread over, making sure they kind of sit next to each other real nice. Go back down through the stiff stuff, pulling my thread. Now this time I'm going to come up 3 Delicas back. So I'm coming up between the Delicas and the cab, and like I said, 3 Delicas back. So 1, 2, 3, and then my needle is coming up. Now this time I'm going to go instead of going through just the 2 Delicas, I'm going to go through 3, and this is the pattern you're going to take for the rest of the time around the Delica for this first row. So there's that. Okay, I'm going to do it a couple more times to show you, and then you can finish up this row on your own, and we'll come back together to continue. So one more time, 2 Delicas, dropping them down, needle straight down. Make sure you don't do angles because you don't want the beads to be crowded too much. You want them to be close together but not crowded and pushing each other out of the way and things like that. If you need to look, sometimes I look and I just have my needle go through right about the middle. That'll take you about 3. There you go. Pull that tight. Go through the 3 there. Pull that. Okay. So I'm going to continue that row. I'm going to show you one more time. Pick up 2 Delicas. Drop them all the way down. Take my needle straight down. Oh, my stiff stuff wants to move. Make sure you hold it there with your fingers. Straight down there. Pulling that thread nice and tight. Coming up in the middle of that stitch between the beads and the cab. through the last 3 here to help secure them. And you can see they're already starting to sit. I don't know if you can see that. You can see how one's up higher than the other as we go along. That's kind of cool. Kind of sets it up perfect for our peyote. Okay, so go ahead and continue doing that around the edge of your cab. And when you get close to the end, that's where we're going to pick up again. So go ahead and pause at that point, and then we'll continue together. Okay, you should have the first full row around the base of your cab, except for maybe a little space on the end here. The reason I had you stop a little bit before the end is because sometimes it takes a little finagling to complete the row and make it still be even numbers of Delicas. So I think I have room here for 2 more, so I'm going to definitely pick up 2 more, drop it all the way down, following the steps that we've done all the way around the cab, down. So there's the back. Your stitches should sort of look like that. It's okay if they're not perfect. They'll get perfect as you practice. More perfect. Okay. Through those 3. Okay. Now, I have a little bit of space there. Obviously, that's not enough space to fit even 1 more Delica, let alone 2. So I'm just going to step up, excuse me, to start our next row. To do that, I'm going to go through this the very first bead that we put on. And just pull that through. Now I'm ready to start the second row, which is going to start our peyote. You'll notice that the beads kind of sit one up, one down, one up, one down, which will help us do our second row, the peyote, very easily. So I already went into this one, so this is one is down, so I'm going to go through, skip the next one, and go through the third one, so that you have basically, so it's 1 Delica, 2 Delicas, 1 Delica in a row there. So once again, I already went through this one. I'm going to skip the next one. So I'm going to pick up a Delica, skip the next space, go through the next Delica. So then I'm creating that peyote there. One more time. Pick up a Delica, skip one, go in the next one. See how my peyote is starting there? Okay, so you're going to do that the whole way around. And then I'll show you how to step up into your next row. Okay, so I'm getting ready to put my last Delica on to my second row here. So I'm skipping that one, going through this one, and I'm going to pull that in. Now, to step up to do my next row, you're going to do the same thing that we did before. I'm going to go through this first Delica that I put on the second row. Now, this is a peyote bezel. So if we look at the example here, the bezel needs to have enough rows so that it's coming up over the edge of the cab. Excuse me. So that it's coming up over the cab, and then we use 15s at the end to kind of cinch it together. So I would say I need probably at least 1 or 2 more rows of Delicas to get to the point where I need to do 15s. So we've already stepped up into our third row here. I'm going to do a third row. And then depending on what kind of cab you have, if it's thicker, you might need more rows. If it's thinner, you might be good with just 1 more row. So let's continue adding rows until we get it like over the edge so that we can add the 15s. Okay, now that we have the bezel done, we're going to head on to our next step, which would be adding a row of 11s around the edge. Now, after the bezel, it kind of gets into a point where you can decide to do whatever you like. If you wanted to do 2 or 3 rows, if you wanted to do 8 O's and then 11 O's, it's up to you. But I'm just doing this basic pendant with you to start, and then I'll be doing more videos later to show you different things to do with bead embroidery. So if you want to continue with me and just do the row of 11s, then that is fine. If you want to do the row of 11s and then do your own thing, that's also fine. So, okay, so to continue my row of 11s, remember my needle is coming out the back now. When I finished my bezel here, I took my thread down diagonally through the beads and out the back of my Lacey stiff stuff. Now I'm just going to take and have my needle come up again right on the edge of my bezel there, because I'm going to be nice and close to the edge of my bezel to add that row of 11s. We're going to do something similar to what we did at the beginning for our first row of Delicas. So you're going to pick up 2, well, I'm going to do 3 actually. So we're going to pick up 3. It doesn't have to be an even number this time because we're not eventually creating peyote from it. So we just want to kind of keep it in a line, keep it enough beads that we can manage, because if we tried to do like 8, it would be really difficult, I think, and they'd move around more. But this way, we're doing the same thing. So as you just saw, I picked up 3 beads, I laid them to the side, just like I did on my first row of Delicas, like that. I pull them so they lay along the edge, and plus it helps me see the spacing. And then I'm going to take my needle straight down at the edge of the bead there, pull through, and then I'm coming up between the beads and the bezel, right behind that 4th bead. So I'm going to go through 4 of the beads. So this is going to go a lot faster than the Delicas one, the first row of Delicas, I mean, because we're doing 3 or 4 beads at a time. It's up to you. I like to do 3. I think it looks better. I think it keeps the line more even. But either way, it's faster, and we don't have to worry about even numbers, like I said, because we're not building peyote out of it when we're done. So once again, back here between the beads and the bezel, through the 4 11s, and you're going to do that the whole way around. So I'm going to show you one more time, and then we're going to take a break so that we can finish that whole way around, and then I'll show you how to add the backing and finish it up. Okay, so I added my beads, dropped them down, went through the back, coming back up between the beads and the bezel, 4 beads back, going through 4 of the beads to secure it and to start that line there. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so I finished. I ended up doing 4 rows of peyote with the Delicas, and I think that's how many I did on the example. So the Golem cabs are pretty consistent in size if you're using that. If you're using a different type of cab, like I said, you might have ended up just doing 3 rows or maybe needing to do more rows. You just need them to be able to go over the top of the cab so that you can cinch it up then with the 15s. So the last row here that we're going to do in the peyote bezel will be the 15s. Okay, so I've already stepped up to my last row there, and there's really nothing different than what we've been doing the whole time, except because the 15s are a little bit smaller than the 11 Delicas that we're using. It's going to help to kind of pull that together and finish it off really nice. So that's why we'd use the 15s here at the end. You can see there how they're starting to lay. So for the example here, I did 2 rows of 15, so that's what I'm going to do here to finish up the bezel. I'm going to do a row of 15s around and then step up and do 1 more row. I'll show you how to finish that off when you get there. Okay, now as you're finishing this last row of 15s, make sure that you are kind of pulling, not too hard, but a nice tug so that you are, like I said, cinching those Delicas in and closing it up around that beautiful cab that you're working on. Okay. Last one. Okay, the other cool thing about bead embroidery is it's easy for you to hide your thread when you're done. So to finish this bezel, all I'm going to do is take my needle and I'm going to go down through the beads in my bezel, diagonal, just like that. See, I'm coming down through those beads that are already there. It's a great way, it just hides your thread perfectly. I'm going to go through 2 more and then out the back of the stiff stuff. Ta-da! So you can see your thread now is on the back, completely hidden, and you're ready to start your row around to complete the front of your basic bead embroidery pendant. Okay, coming to the end of that first row there around the bezel, when you get close to the end, because it doesn't have to be even, you don't have to worry about there being an even number of beads, but you have to kind of finagle it to make sure that you get the right number of beads in to fill the space but not make it too crowded or too loose and so on. So here I've picked up 3 beads. I think they're going to fit just fine, but I'm going to drop them down anyway and kind of line them up there. Yeah, I think that'll be a good fit. So once again, I'm going to go down through the mat, or the Lacey stiff stuff, back up between the beads and the bezel, and then through those last 4, and then I'm going to go through that first one again too, so that will be going through 5, and pulling that tight, and then taking my needle back down through my Lacey stiff stuff, so that it disappears under my piece again. Okay, so this is all the bead embroidery we're going to do here on the flat part of the Lacey stiff stuff. So we're going to tie this off like you would if you were sewing. So I'm going to take my needle under one of the stitches here, take it through the loop, pull, do it again, if you want to, you can glue those knots, but you don't have to because we're going to be gluing the backing on to that anyway, and that will secure the knots as well as the backing. I'm going to trim up my little threads there. Good. So that's about what your back should look like. Don't worry if it's not perfect, it's your first time. Okay, so the next step we need to do is cut off the excess Lacey stiff stuff. So I'm going to use scissors, and you want to cut perpendicular to your beads. You don't want to cut on an angle because you do not want to cut any of your threads. So I just sort of take my scissors and carefully cut directly perpendicular, straight up and down, along the edge of my beads, as close as I can get without any of my stiff stuff hanging out. Okay, so there's my extra there. You can see there I still have lots of room between my stitches, but I have some spaces out here that are sticking out. So I'm going to, still being perpendicular, not cutting on an angle at all, going to cut along the edge here so that I can get rid of that extra Lacey stiff stuff. Okay, that's pretty good. I'll pick up my scraps here. Okay, the next step was we're going to be adding the backing onto it. Okay, so here I am at the edge of my brick stitch that I've been doing. How did yours go? It looks harder than it is, isn't it? All right, so when you get to the edge here, sort of like when we did the other rows, with bead embroidery you kind of have to kind of finagle a bit. So here isn't really enough space to fit one more bead. I mean, I could, but it would be pretty crowded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle down through that first bead and I'm going to sort of tighten that up a bit. I'm going to bring it back up through that last bead again and just kind of do that twice just to make sure it's nice and sturdy. Okay, we are almost done. The last part we need to do is add a couple loops up top as a bail, and we're at the perfect point to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up through one of the beads again. I'm going to pick up, I used 15 beads for these loops, 15 on each. So I'm going to do that. If you are using something thinner, you can use less beads. If you find that you're going to use something thicker, you can use more beads. It's really up to you. Okay, so like I said, the next step would be to add the backing. I'm using an Ultrasuede in Soft Morning Sky for my backing. And we need to add the backing before we do the side work, because the side brick stitch work actually completes the piece by stitching the back part to the rest of your piece. So we're going to be gluing a piece of that on first. Again, just like the Lacey Stiff stuff, you don't need much. I usually just put my thing in the corner here and cut a piece just the size I need. Put that to the side. Okay, you're going to need your E6000 for this. And I just squeeze a little and kind of spread it around. I always use my awl. You can use toothpicks, or if you feel comfortable just spreading it with the tube itself, go for it. Okay, and then you're going to place it on there and kind of push it down. Make sure it's even. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to trim the backing just like I did the Lacey Stiff stuff, making sure that my scissors are straight up and down because you want them to be even, almost like slices of bread. You want them to be even, the Lacey Stiff stuff and the Ultrasuede, because you're going to be stitching those two layers together around the edge, as you can see there. See how it's the same around. Okay, put my scraps over here. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be working on doing this brick stitch edging and then adding the thing, the little loop on top that you can use as a bail. So I'm going to need to get more thread because I ran out doing my bezel and other parts. So hold on. Okay, so once again, I'm using the 0.006 Wildfire in green, and I cut about a wingspan here to use. And just like before, I'm going to put the needle on one end of my thread, and I'll put a knot on the other end of my thread. Okay, so we're going to be adding that brick stitch edge to give it that nice finished look. So I have my needle on one end and my knot on the other. I'm going to take my needle and go through just the Lacey Stiff stuff right on the edge there, and I'm going to pull it all the way, and I'm going, so that way I'm going to use the Ultrasuede to kind of hide that knot. I'm going to put that in between there so you can't really see it. Okay, to do brick stitch you always start with 2 beads. So I picked up 2 of my 11s. You're going down through both pieces of fabric, the stiff stuff and the Ultrasuede. And you want to leave enough space so that 2 beads can lay on their side. So let me show you. So I'm going to pull that through. And this is just for the first one, where you'd have 2. So I'm coming up through that second bead, pulling it tight. Now I'm going to go down through the first one and back up through that second one, and that's going to help lay those first 2 beads like little bricks on the edge of the piece. Okay? Alright, now to continue, you only need to pick up 1 at a time. So I pick up a bead, I give it about the space it needs to sit, I go through both pieces, pull it, and then I come back up through the hole on the bottom. If you missed that, I'm going to show you many times. So you pick up a bead, leave a little space for the bead to sit, going through both pieces, the Lacey Stiff and the Ultrasuede, pulling it nice and tight, just like that, and then you take your needle up through the bottom of that bead and pull it tight. See how it's starting to make our little stitches there along the edge? It creates a really nice finished look and hides all your stitches on the back of your Lacey Stiff stuff. So that's why I really like doing it this way. Once again, pick up a bead through both pieces, pull it, taking my needle up through the bottom of the bead, pulling it tight so that it lays on its side just like that. Okay? And we're going to do that the whole way around. Okay, so that's 10, 11, 12. Okay, so I'm going to drop those down. And I'm going to take my needle down through the backing some. I'm going to pull that tight, and that's going to make my loop there. Now I need to go back through my beads again just to make them stronger, because this is your bail. That's what your pendant is going to be hanging from, so you want it to be pretty sturdy. So I'm just going to go back through all of my beads one more time, plus that'll enable me to go back next to it to add the second one. If you like the idea of having 3 loops instead of 2, you can go ahead and do that. If you like the idea of just having 1 loop, you can do that as well. There's a lot more freedom, I feel, in bead embroidery than in some other techniques. So once you learn the techniques, then you can kind of do what you want with it and make it your own, which I really enjoy. Okay, so there's my first loop already done. I came up through the next bead over. I'm going to pick up my 15 beads again and make my second loop. Okay. One more. Okay, drop those down. Same thing, I'm going to go through some of the backing there to secure it. Back up through the beads. Make sure I go through all of them to keep that bail sturdy. Okay, then I'm going to go back down through the bead and out the back. underneath there. Okay, now the last thing that's left to do is just to tie off. So I do it pretty close to my bail so I can kind of hide the knot there. So I'm going through the Ultrasuede just like we did on the backing when we were making a knot. And go through the loop there and pull. And I'm going to do it one more time. Through the loop and pull. And if you want, you can use a little glue to put on your knot there to secure it. And then you can use a thread burner or little scissors to snip off your extra. And there you have your intro to bead embroidery pendant. I hope you stay tuned. We're going to be doing more videos about bead embroidery using different objects. Any of these products that I use today you can purchase from PotomacBeads.com or PotomacBeads.eu. You can share this video with a friend if you think is interested. Maybe you want to get together with a friend and learn some bead embroidery together. I think that would be super fun. You can also check us out on Facebook. We have a beading group there that's really supportive and helpful that you can check out. And thanks for watching. Have a great day.